We're continuing work now on the delete user page, and the next thing I've done, I've actually put this in already, is added a panel, and inside this panel I added a data grid or a grid view, and inside this you notice I'm not going to set an access data source or an SQL data source on this one. I'm actually going to use some VB code to set the data source, and let's go look at that code. I have this in the page load event right now, and what I'm doing is setting the data source to something that's returned from our membership object. And here's what I'm doing. I'm asking this object, which actually queries the database, and say, will you get me a list of all the users? And that's our source for our grid. And then the reason I have this in here twice is when we use this little mini SQL desktop engine, sometimes it takes 2 tries. So we could just have this once. But you can stick inside this try and catch just to make sure that you're actually getting it. Then the last statement that happens every time is this data bind that says, okay, we've built the data source, built a pipeline to our source, but now let's actually put the data in our grid view. So when we run this, what we see is this. So again, if I can't remember the user's name, I can now look in the grid view and see this. And so now I could come up here and say, well, the user's name that I want to delete is Fred, and then hit the delete user. So you notice that this is a little cumbersome. There's too much data in here, and maybe I don't need to see this. So we'll handle that in the next tutorial. We'll trim these things down, and we'll do some toggling of the different views so we only see either this delete user thing or this grid. But anyway, that's the end of this one, is putting this grid view on and then getting the data from the membership database. And again, this is all done with some code, and you can copy and paste this code, and then the only thing we put on the page was the grid view. Oh, and this is also on that grid view. You notice we put this auto generate columns equals true. That's what put all the data on here for us. Oh, and let me just point out one other thing. We also have this columns column section where we add the button. That's the delete button that shows up on the left hand of that grid view.